If you've watched some of my previous reviews, you will already know that I love survival games, especially if they support multiplayer. Hobo Tough Life is such a game, so needless to say, it was only a matter of time before I would stumble on it. To be honest, I was not sure how well such a game could be executed. Survival games usually require you to keep an eye on your vitals while trying to reach a point at which you thrive. The good ones offer a controlled difficulty curve which starts relatively high since you are mostly naked and without any useful perks or skills as you spawn. Then the difficulty drops a bit as you get accustomed to all the different gameplay mechanics and get better at staying alive. Next, you are encouraged to explore and find more resources, which you will need in order to thrive. This is when the challenge increases again, and finally, once you really get good at everything, you suddenly become a master at the game and pretty much dominate the whole map. This curve works really well and is one of the most important aspects of designing a good survival game because of how rewarding it can be. So when my wife and I started as hobos, we quickly confirmed that the game is not messing around. Our hobos were constantly hungry, dirty, cold, and exhausted. There are a lot of stats to consider, and at first it feels a bit overwhelming, especially because the game doesn't really bother to explain things properly. You will get a few quests which give you a rough idea of what has to happen, but it's simply way too little. This is not unusual, and in fact, I'd actually say that it's rather typical for this genre of game. It's a gauntlet of pain at first designed to break your spirit. Normally I'd be pissed at such an approach, but in survival games this is part of the experience and makes mastering these mechanics all the more rewarding. Kind of how new players in Dark Souls get raped a few times before they even understand what is happening. The difficulty is part of the experience and makes killing your first boss so exhilarating. This is where the game does something which I really do not like. As you are learning all the things you can do to stay alive, your hobo will almost certainly pay with his life so that you can understand how, when, and what to eat, drink, etc. He is your lab rat and death is inevitable. The problem is that the game actually punishes you hard for your death. At first I assumed that the price for my death will be that I will drop all of my equipment and have to pick it up, similarly to how it was in Conan Exiles for example. No, that's not exactly how it works here. Your gear is gone, but you can buy it back at reduced prices from a special NPC, so that's not too terrible. However, dying decreases all of your base stats every time. Allow me to explain. A new hobo has 100% health, 100% stamina, etc. After a single death, he will now have 90% of everything as your max stat. Die a few more times and your max health will be 50%, your max stamina will be 50%, etc. This is a terrible idea. Before we even realized how things work, my wife and I were already anemic hobos who can't run for more than 20 meters without having to take a break since our stamina is already low and is basically expend as soon as we run a little bit, who get hungry all the times and who need to constantly sleep. The game essentially increases its difficulty by a lot every time you die. So we checked online and found out that there is a way to fix this, but it requires a very expensive item and was way beyond what our poor, perpetually sleepy hobos could ever hope to make in terms of money. A difficult choice was before us. We could try to power through the extremely unfair situation, collect the tons of money by any means necessary, or give up and start over. As attached as we had become to our hobos, we had to put them down and move on to newer ones. This time, armed with some basic knowledge of the game, we now managed to stay alive and preserve our stats, although surviving was still difficult and very challenging. Allow me to describe some of the struggles our hobos had to face. First of all, let's talk money. Pretty much anything you can do to survive in Hobo Tough Life will require money or gathering of materials. Making money is extremely important and will be your main objective at first. The game's target is to become the Hobo King, which requires you to befriend all the different factions of the game, but at first none of that really matters. Your job is to make sure your hobo doesn't die. Luckily, there are many ways to make money. In short, you either beg, barter, or steal your way to fortune. Your hobo has many talents, and they increase as you practice them, similarly to Skyrim. And speaking of Skyrim, the lockpicking minigame is one-to-one from there, which I like because it both works well and is familiar. So we walk around begging on the streets of Prague, diving to dumpsters and stealing whatever we can. At first my wife and I simply specialized in different things. I was a good beggar and a thief, while she was great at dumpster diving. This is where the secondary stats come into play. You see, if you steal a lot, you lose morale. Lose enough of it and your hobo gets depressed, which causes him to begin losing health. If you dive into a dumpster a lot, as my wife did, you will get stinky pretty fast. This in turn means that people don't want to deal with you. You can also injure yourself while playing the minigame, which causes you to lose a bit of health, and you also damage your clothes, which means they need to be mended because ultimately if they're broken, their stats are useless. Essentially, anything you do will have its pros and cons, and it is up to you as the player to fix these problems on time. The beauty of Hobo Tough Life is that it offers many ways of fixing these conditions, but most of them also come with drawbacks. For example, in my case, I could cure my morale by drinking alcohol or even taking drugs, but getting drunk too often can make you into an alcoholic, while taking drugs can get you addicted to them as well. Addiction is bad because you either have to constantly get more of your poison of choice, or you have to go cold turkey, which means that your hobo will take constant damage for a certain time before it's all out of your system. One quest demanded that I'm hammered while talking to some drunk guys, and this turned my hobo into an alcoholic. This was the first and last time I got him addicted to anything. The rehab process cost me all of my healing items and I barely managed to survive. The moral of the story is don't do drugs. As for my wife, her dumpster diving made her super stinky, so she had to pay to have her clothes cleaned and then also have to take a shower, and then she had to have her clothes repaired because they were also torn up. It's also a pain in the ass. I later found out, by the way, that there is a way to restore morale by simply reading a lot of nudie magazines, which was pretty sweet. There are always options that are really good and barely have any drawbacks, but those are rather expensive and not something you'll be doing at the beginning of the game. In any case, we both decided at some point that we want to do everything, and so I was also dumpster diving as well as she was begging and stealing. I remember how we would stand in front of the train station begging and pickpocketing the whole time. One would stand watch and warn the other one if a policeman is nearby, because those arrest you if you try to steal while they're around. I found that out the hard way. The jail time is done really well, by the way. You have none of your items and you are in a cold prison cell for around a minute. You can try to sleep to recover some energy, but since it's cold, your hobo will soon be freezing, and then if you get sick, you will begin to lose health. It's designed really well. A minute is not a lot of time, but it is annoying enough for you not to want to be there. No matter what path you take, at some point you will begin to accumulate more money, and this is when you have to decide what you wish to buy first. For us it was pretty obvious: warmer clothes and a dog, because dogs make everything better. Naturally, the game won't just let you go and buy stuff without placing some hazards in your way. Enter the thugs who rob you. These assholes are especially active at night and will come and mug you if you happen to be close by and have some money on you. If you happen to be super stinky, by the way, they will just decide to leave you in peace because nobody wants to deal with you when you're super stinky. They will also spare you if you happen to have very little money on you, so it's not worth their time, or if you give them a nice cigarette, which by the way is a rare item and is something you'll find throughout the middle and the later end of the game, but not right at the start. In most cases, they will still take your money, or at least a big chunk of it. I also found that out the hard way and lost all of my early game hard-earned cash. It does help that they almost always stand around at specific spots and will only approach you if you are close, so avoiding them is possible, but the game will also occasionally send one your way at random, and if you don't notice him and run away in time, he will mug you. Later the game will provide you with various options of dealing with him, such as giving him a good quality cigarette as I've mentioned, or beating the crap out of him providing you have the correct fighting perks and a weapon which boosts your fighting stats. And speaking of perks, you're probably wondering about those. Since the game is essentially an RPG, you can unlock perks, but instead of doing so when you level up, in Hobo Tough Life, you get to learn perks from the hobo NPCs around you. However, they won't just cough up their secrets to just any other hobo. If you want to find yourself in the privileged position of learning from the great knowledge of the other hobos who have been there before you, you have to first become their friend, and that is achieved by completing quests for them, being nice, and even giving them gifts. It's also one of the ways for you to earn respect of the leaders of each faction, which is necessary in order for them to cast their vote in your favor at the upcoming Hobo King election. You probably forgot that that's our actual goal. I know I had when I was playing. I was just so busy with staying alive and dealing with the everyday hardships of being a hobo, leading me to completely forget about my main goal of becoming the Hobo King. Well, once you start getting used to the game's mechanics, staying alive will become much easier. As long as you keep your morale high, rest when exhausted, and eat when hungry, and don't get too stinky from too much dumpster diving, or simply because you couldn't find the toilet in time and ended up shitting your pants.
god, Nino, did you just shit yourself?
I may have. Yep, it's a real thing and it's both hilarious and annoying since you now have to run across town to have your clothes washed and take a shower. But I digress. Once you have the game's mechanics under control, you will begin to pay attention to crafting, stats and perks, which will involve lots of quests and running around the map. And when it comes to the map, I have to say that I can't decide if I think it's terrible or great. It's rather small and even features quick travel in the form of public transport. I both love and hate the fact that it's extremely confusing. Even after 60 hours, I still had a hard time navigating it and finding some of the places I was looking for. This means that traveling the map can be confusing, but it also means that you will feel like you keep discovering new things as you go. From a technical standpoint, the game is rather clunky and ugly. Don't expect amazing graphics or animations here. I mean, it's a budget game, we can't ask too much. Although it would have been nice if it looked even better, I am well aware that the budget is limited. Even so, we still have full ultrawide support, both 21:9 and 32:9 work out the box, which is awesome. All the speech is written, but we do have some minimal voice acting in Czech when approaching any of the NPCs. Yes, they speak the Czech language. This is supposed to be Prague. It has a different name, but it is Prague. I actually went there not too long ago, and some of the sites that I went to see are literally one-to-one in the game, so it definitely is Prague in the Czech Republic, but it's called Praslav here. And so, as I've mentioned, the NPCs will give you very short phrases in their own language, and to somebody such as myself who does not speak Czech, it sounds almost like The Sims talking, so it's kind of cute. I don't know how to describe it. It was charming and amusing, I liked it. It somehow added to my experience. In addition to that, the gameplay has some indirect and direct choices which will have serious effects on your playthrough. For example, there's this gypsy guy who can teach you a very useful speech perk. You have to do a few boring quests for him before he trusts you enough to give you the more serious jobs. Unfortunately, another faction wanted me to extort some money from him, which I foolishly did, and it caused me to lose some of my reputation points with the gypsy. As a result, I had done all of his minor missions, but my relationship with him had now been hurt, and therefore he would refuse to give me the next set of missions, which would have given me more points, with the help of which I would have been able to unlock the possibility to buy the perk from him. So I was locked out of it. I could not get it in this playthrough, which really sucked because I really wanted it. The same thing happened when I snitched to the police about some criminal activities of another guy. But okay, I was a snitch and I deserved what was coming to me. So yeah, your choices matter, and sometimes it even matters when you make these choices. Had I first befriended the gypsy, then gotten the perk from him, and finally mugged him after I already had what I wanted, all would have been good for me. Not for him obviously, but for me. But I was not thinking ahead of time, and to be quite honest, I was underestimating of what the game would actually account for, and just assumed that I could do whichever quest is closest to me geographically, and it wouldn't make a difference, but it very much did. Later on, that had changed because I had learned from my mistakes, and while I was backtracking more since I was intentionally skipping some quests for a later time, I ended up getting a lot more out of it, and it made more fun too because I got to see more quests. Now I was manipulating everyone and it was just awesome. And let me tell you about some things that annoyed me about the game. First and foremost, you could get mugged on the streets while several policemen are passing by, literally next to you while you're getting mugged, and they don't give a rat's ass. Now, one could excuse this by saying that it's consistent with one of the game's conspiracies, namely that the police don't give a damn about the homeless, but it felt more like it was just not programmed to be happening, that's all. Then there are many points where more depth could have been implemented. For example, why can't I use public transport without having a ticket? I mean, I'm a hobo, there should be a chance for me to do it. Perhaps one of the minigames could be implemented where if I fail, I'm just not allowed to board the bus, but if I succeed, I travel for free essentially. Another thing that the game does is some of the hobos will occasionally just get drunk at random. Some of them like to drink, and when you want to go talk to them, return a quest or something, you just get this message that this hobo is currently too drunk and you should come back later. And speaking of coming back later, some of the quests will actually require for you to go away, do some other stuff, and then come back hours later or even a day later or two for the quest to be able to continue. For example, you set a trap and you gotta come back later to see if something got caught, or you brought something to someone and now he has to use it to craft something for you, and that'll be done much later. And as you progress through the game, this happens more and more often, and it's kind of annoying. It's not the end of the world, there's always something to do, but I think to myself, now why do I have to walk around and come back to this guy later when I'm here right now? You know, it kind of sucks. It's annoying, and some of the quests really make you wonder what's gonna happen next, and I don't like that. I want to get my gratification right here and right now, instantly. But yeah, it's not a perfect game, it has some rough edges, but it also has an incredible amount of depth. I haven't even mentioned many of the other gameplay features such as base building, how the temperature matters, and even how rain and snow make you wet, and now you could get sick if you stay soaked and freezing for too long, which then brings its own set of problems. I have not mentioned the buffs which can be gained, the different hobos with specific traits which can be unlocked if you do certain things in the game. There's a lot here, but honestly, I feel like it would be more fun for you, dear player, to also find lots of things on your own. So I'm not gonna give you everything out here. At the end of the day, my verdict is simple. Hobo Tough Life is a hidden gem. I expected very little and got many hours of challenging yet surprisingly fun gameplay. It's a really good survival game and you should definitely give it a shot. This game is a classic example of how one can do a lot with very little. While it has its funny moments, the game also takes itself quite seriously. So my advice is, give it a shot, and if you are not an experienced player in survival games, be patient. The life of a hobo is tough, but it gets easier over time. With that having been said, I want to thank you for watching Game Filter. I'd love to see you again next time, and would like to remind you about my Patreon link in the description of this video, where I publish links to all the great free games I can find, so give it a look from time to time and never miss on another sweet freebie. And as always, have a great day. This is Nino signing out.